Welcome to Spurs Up Episode 6. I'm your host, Eli Brand.
And I'm Zack McKinstry.
And we're going to jump right into it. College basketball season starts tonight, and I want to do some conference predictions and some Final Four picks. So I'm going to start off with the Big 12. What do you have for that?
Big 12, I think it's pretty obvious that Kansas is the number one in the Big 12. They've won 13 straight Big 12 regular season titles. And with Devontae Graham back, I think that streak continues.
Yeah, the Big 12's been Kansas and everybody else, especially since Frank Martin left Kansas State and went to some other school. I don't remember where he went. And I think this will definitely be Kansas's 14th straight victory. Bill Self has taken them over the moon in conference play, and I don't think anyone has a chance to compete with them.
Absolutely.
So now we're going to move on to the Big 10. Who do you have in that?
Big 10, I have Michigan State. They're not only the Big 10 favorite, but ranked number 2 in the polls and a contender for the championship this year. So with 4 starters returning, including the electric Miles Bridges, I think that experience will take them pretty far.
I've also got Michigan State. I think Tom Izzo is what's going to be the biggest factor for them, along with Miles Bridges, who no one really expected to come back after his freshman year. Tom Izzo always, after a down year, which they had last year, takes them over the top and puts them into positions to win championship games, like 2 years ago when he took them on that Final Four run. Another team to look out for is Minnesota. You know, Richard Pitino's up there. He's getting good talent in. And you know when Pitino's bringing good talent, you never know what's really going on. But it's there right now. Nothing's wrong, apparently. So we'll see how that goes for him.
Absolutely.
So now we're going to go on to the Pac-12. Who do you have there?
Pac-12 I'm excited for. I think it's going to be a pretty exciting conference. I have Arizona, currently ranked the number 3 team in the nation, and an offensive powerhouse. So they're also competing for a national title, and Oregon and UCLA on their heels, with USC, a lot of height to live up to for them.
Okay. I've also got Arizona winning the Pac-12. Pretty straightforward year this year. I think Arizona is the second most talented team outside of Duke. Alonzo Trier is going to be the biggest thing for them this year, coming back off of that 19-game PED suspension, which the NCAA gave him, even though they admitted that he probably took the substance without even knowing what it was. So it was kind of ridiculous for them to even do that. But the NCAA has always been shady and
absolutely
kind of worthless in what they do. But other teams, USC, UCLA, Oregon, are all teams to look out for. I think USC is going to be the biggest threat to Arizona because of Andy Enfield. We all know what he did with Florida Gulf Coast in the NCAA tournament a couple years ago, taking down Georgetown and moving on as far as he did. Okay, so now let's move on to the SEC.
The SEC, I have Kentucky, even though they've owned the conference for a long time and Florida's on the come up, but I think they shut them down this year again. A lot of good teams and a lot of new players coming in, like Michael Porter for Missouri, star-studded recruit. And I have Vanderbilt as a sleeper team that, bearing a late game blunder in the first round against Northwestern last year, they easily could have made it through 2 rounds. So we'll see what they have this year.
I think that the SEC is the deepest conference in the country this year. I think they have the most teams that have the potential to win the conference. But when you don't know what to do in the SEC, always pick Kentucky because that's just always what happens when it comes down to it at the end of the day. Teams like Alabama, South Carolina, Missouri with Michael Porter Jr. coming in, which no one really expected to go to Missouri after the awful season they had last year. Georgia, Texas A&M, Florida, Vanderbilt, so many great teams. But I think Kentucky's definitely the most talented team, and that's why I'm taking them to win the conference.
I agree.
So now we're going to move on to the most talented conference, in my opinion, the ACC. What do you have there?
Yeah, 5 top 25 teams in the ACC. And I think the competition between Duke, UNC, Miami, Louisville, and Notre Dame is going to be really intense this year. Of course, America's most watchable villain is back in Grayson Allen. And I think him paired up with a number 1 recruit, Marvin Bagley, takes the number 1 team, Duke. They take the ACC.
I think the ACC is going to come down to 3 teams this year between Duke, UNC, and Louisville. UNC, obviously the defending champions, but they lost a lot of talent last year. They lost Kennedy Meeks, their center, for the past few years. It seems like he was there for 38 years. I was tired of seeing him. They lost Josh Jackson, who was the ACC Player of the Year last year, but they did retain Joe Barry, so I think he'll be a good asset for them to have. But he's going to miss the first few games of the season punching walls after playing 2K, but we've all been there before. Louisville, I think the scandal for them is going to be too much hanging over their head. Never know what's going to come up behind them. The NCAA could give them sanctions at any moment. They lost their head coach, the guy that recruited them and brought them to Louisville. So with that being said, I think Duke's definitely going to win the conference. I think they're the most talented team in the country with Marvin Bagley, Grayson Allen, and the thing that's going to take them over the top for me is Trayvon Duval. Duke hasn't had a true point guard since Tyus Jones left after the 2015 title, and having that is what I think is going to put them back to the top of college basketball. So let's move on to what people really want to know for the college basketball season coming up. Who do you have in the Final Four?
Final Four picks. So I have Michigan State, Duke, and Kansas for reasons we talked about. obviously, big players, big coaching. And my sleeper pick this year is actually a team we did not talk about in the American Conference. Is Wichita State. And most people remember them from their Cinderella run a couple years back. But now ranked number 7 to start the season, and I'm excited to see what they can do.
Greg Marshall's definitely had the Shockers playing good basketball the past few years. Who do you have winning the national championship?
National championship, as of now, I'm going to give it to Duke, but we know their March Madness history. They've ended up blowing a lot of second round.
They're definitely rags or riches when it comes to playing in the NCAA tournament.
But I think they have the talent this year to do it.
Okay, so the teams I have in the Final Four are Duke, Michigan State, Arizona, and Kansas. I think Duke's the most talented team in the country. That's why I have them there. Michigan State and Kansas, also solid bases that they have, good coaches, and I think that the veteran leadership that they have will take them to the Final Four. And Arizona, they just can't break through to get into the Final Four, it seems. Last year was the year we thought they'd do it when they had the home court advantage, the Final Four being in Arizona. Had an inexplicable loss to Xavier. I still don't know how in the world they lost that game, but it's in San Antonio this year, so it's staying close to home, and I think they finally do break through.